by Dave McCormick. He is a veteran, a Wall Street guru, and he is running for United States Senate in Pennsylvania. Dave, good to have you back on the program.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. Let's start with this if we can, Dave. Are you going to win in Pennsylvania? Why? I'm sure you're going to say yes, but why? And what can be done there to make sure that it's not just you, but other Republicans who come away with W's this time, given what the shenanigans we saw in Pennsylvania back in 2020?
Yeah, well, it's gonna be a great election in 2024, primarily because 80% of Pennsylvanians think the country's going in the wrong direction. They look at this border crisis, they look at record high inflation, they look at crime, 5,000 fentanyl deaths, and they are terribly worried about the future of the country and the future of Pennsylvania. And my opponent, Bob Casey's been there 17 years, and frankly hasn't done much of anything, and has voted 98% of the time with Joe Biden. So it's a change election. People see this as an opportunity to put new leadership in place, and I'm someone who's been a leader in the military and in business, and I'm going to go there to shake up Washington, and that is the contrast. And I think that same thing holds true for other candidates, whether it's the top of the ticket or other candidates down the path. Everybody views our current country as in decline, and we need leadership to fix it.
Dave, great to see you last night. I know you're going all over the country and all over Pennsylvania raising money to be able to win what I think is one of the 2 or 3 most important Senate races in the entire country coming up in 2024. It looks like Trump is going to be the Republican nominee, and you will be the nominee for the Senate in Pennsylvania. How do you think you help Trump? How do you think Trump helps you? What does a coalition of winners look like in Pennsylvania? Because if Trump wins Pennsylvania, he's going to be the president. And if you win Pennsylvania, Republicans are going to have control of the Senate, too.
Yeah, the stakes are high, which is why I'm so committed to winning and why I'm making this run. I think President Trump, and I see it across the Commonwealth, I mean, people come out on behalf. He mobilizes a huge part of the Republican Party that come out very enthusiastically for him, and that happened in 2016. It happened in 2020, and that'll happen in 2024. And I think I hopefully will be the beneficiary of that great turnout. But I also bring to the ticket someone who can really appeal across all of Pennsylvania and build a coalition of those independents that are very unhappy with the direction of the country, conservative Democrats, business people that see the regulations coming under President Biden killing their businesses. And so my guess is that President Trump at the top of the ticket will help me, and I'd be hopeful that my candidacy and the strength I would bring will help him.
Dave, you ran in the last cycle, right, as a Republican and lost in the primary, and then that seat ended up going to not Dr. Fetterman, to John Fetterman. What would you say are the lessons learned? I mean, you got to observe that contest, right? You got to see Fetterman versus Dr. Oz. I think for a lot of people, that was one of the more crushing, morale-destroying moments for the GOP in that cycle that Fetterman was able to win. Put aside some of his more sane commentary recently, what lessons did you take from that as somebody who's now going to be charging up that hill in Pennsylvania and winning the other Senate seat?
Yeah, well, listen, when you lose by 900 votes of 1.5 million cast, I mean, you can. There's lots of things you can learn, and I certainly, throughout my life, when I've failed, that's been the engine for growing, getting off the mat in wrestling or football or the military or business. That's the way you get better, is you learn from the losses. And so I've got lots of lessons. But the most important thing is Pennsylvanians want leadership and they want authenticity. And I'm running a campaign that's based on both. I'm doing this because I love America. I feel like I've been blessed. I want to serve our great country and make sure it doesn't become something that we don't recognize. And I think that resonates with Pennsylvanians. I'm a Pennsylvania kid. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. As we talked about, I wrestled and played football. Wrestling got me to West Point, and then I came back to Pennsylvania after serving in the Gulf War in Iraq. And I helped build a business and create hundreds of jobs. So they want leadership. It's a moment where I think people are getting energized to get out there and vote. And I think that's a great opportunity for me because I think they see my ability to lead and make change, and that's what I'm bringing to the table.
You lost to Oz by about 100 votes. I don't remember. I think you may have just told us, but it was a tiny number. And I'm sure that was crushing. Do you think in the nominee in 2022 you would have beaten Fetterman?
It's hard to say. You never want a Monday morning quarterback. I know that I would have certainly given it everything I could, because I'm doing it because I want to serve the country. And people say to me, God, it's so vicious. Why would you do it again? And the reason is, I love America and I want to serve. And so I don't want to prognosticate about what would have happened. The thing I know is that I feel the energy on the campaign trail. I feel Pennsylvanians crying out for change and leadership and candor, and calling out things that don't make sense, like this border deal, which was proposed and ultimately I think would be bad for Pennsylvanians and bad for America. They want that authenticity. They want that truth. They want that leadership. And that's why I'm optimistic, and that's what I bring to the table.
We were talking last night. You have decided, I hope I'm not stepping on a big announcement, but you're going to go all over Pennsylvania in a tour bus, basically, to try to make sure that you get to every community face to face, be able to shake people's hands all over Pennsylvania, not just obviously in the big cities like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and beyond, but also these small areas where turnout is so huge. And why is it important to have that kind of grassroots campaign as we come up 9 months from now for the election?
Well, I grew up in one of those communities, one of those small towns in Bloomsburg, which is about 40 miles south of Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area. So that's home for me. And, stepping back, 60% of Pennsylvanians are living paycheck to paycheck, and they feel like their country and the people that have been running it haven't been focused on their needs. So I want to get out on the campaign trail and meet people across our great Commonwealth to make sure I'm focused in on the right problems: inflation, border, crime, the things they're telling me, the fentanyl crisis, which I mentioned last night. 5,000 Pennsylvanians last year were killed by fentanyl. So I want to hear it from them, and I also want to introduce myself to them and tell them why I'm running and make that connection. I don't think there's anything that can replace that personal connection. And political consultants will say TV and all these other things. Of course, you got to do that to run a modern campaign, but I don't think there's anything that compares to getting out there and telling people why you want their vote and asking them respectfully to give it to you. And so I'm going to be spending thousands of hours on the road doing that, and I'm honestly excited about it, because that's why I'm running. I want to serve the great people of Pennsylvania.
Dave, in your previous life, or I guess earlier in your life, I guess same life technically, you were somebody who was running a massive hedge fund, and so you had to be right about the trajectory of the economy. You had to get it right to get into that position. What do you think the Biden administration, what are you anticipating? Because we talked about this a little bit in the first hour with some of the possible rate decreases and just other ways that you think they're going to try. I think this audience, it would be helpful if they knew in advance, if we all have a sense of what games are going to be played, what levers are going to be pulled to make a pretty anemic economy look like it's stronger than it is going into the election. What do you foresee?
Well, I think you got to start with the economic reality, and what's happening is there's these headline numbers that you turn on the news or read the newspaper and you'll see GDP up and inflation, the rate of inflation down, and people are surprised. Well, if all these numbers are so good, why aren't people happy with the economy? And the reason they're not happy is that for most people, things have gotten much worse. As I mentioned, 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And so if you look at their experience over the last 3 years, inflation has driven prices up about 20%, and wages have gone up by about 15%. So if you're buying food or rent or fuel, you've got less ability to do that than you did when Joe Biden came into office. And then on top of that, what's happened is interest rates have gone up dramatically. So if you're going to buy a new pickup truck, the payments just went up by 60%. Or if you're going to try to buy a new house purchases are down 50%. They just got twice as expensive. And so that's what most Americans are experiencing. They don't have a big stock portfolio. So if the stock market's up, it doesn't affect them much. And so that's the reality Joe Biden has to confront. And that's why, even though the headline numbers look a little bit better, the overall economy is a lot worse for Pennsylvanians. I don't think there's much likelihood that that's going to change enough to change how people feel about it, how people are experiencing it. Now, what's going to happen is that the Democrats are going to say crazy things. Like my opponent, Bob Casey's talking about greedflation. He thinks the problem is not that they had policy that spent $5 trillion more than they should have, which drove up prices. He thinks the problem is that business people are gouging the consumer with greed, and that greed is the reason that prices are going up. This is exactly what a career politician who's never made payroll, who's never created a single job, this is how they think of things. This is how they think the government is going to bestow opportunity on people as opposed to the private sector creating opportunity. And so I'm going to be calling BS on all this crazy stuff because I actually understand the economy. I'm talking to people on the ground. I know what's happening, and I know what it takes to create jobs. I'll say one more thing on this. What's happened to businesses, whether I go and talk to schools that teach people how to be hairdressers or whether I talk to machinists, small manufacturers, whether I talk to farmers, this regulatory state under Joe Biden, the amount of regulations that have grown and made it harder to run businesses and create new opportunity, that's a huge drag on the economy. So in addition to calling BS on the crazy ideas of the Biden administration and what they say, I'm also going to lay out what needs to happen to get our economy really growing again and helping all Americans, all Pennsylvanians. And part of that's reducing regulation.
I know you're a Penn State fan. Last question for you, maybe the most difficult one out there. One, you can tell us, for people out there who are listening, Pennsylvania, they want to get involved where they need to go. But maybe the most important question in Pennsylvania, certainly in a Super Bowl week, even though neither team is involved, are you a Pittsburgh Steelers or an Eagles guy? Who is your team in the NFL?
All right. I'm Steelers all the way. I grew up watching those great teams in the 70s and was born outside of Pittsburgh, and I lived there and had three of my kids there. So I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan all the way. Now, if the Steelers aren't in it, then I'll cheer for the Eagles. But I'm all Steelers all the time. And if people want to know more about me, including more about the Steelers, it's Dave McCormick, PA.com. And guys, I'm so grateful to be on the show. Thank you.
And by the way, Dave, last night, funny fact, if anybody thinks that you're not going to be able to handle difficulty, you have 6 daughters that you are raising, and I think they're all like teenagers or early 20s. So if anybody out there can do anything, it would be somebody who's got 6 daughters that he's raising.
Yeah, people ask me, Ranger School, 82nd Airborne, running a big company. What was the hardest thing I ever did? And I said, listen, when you've had 6 teenage daughters, everything else seems easy after that.
No doubt. Dave, thanks for all the work. We'll have you on again, but encourage Pennsylvanians to go check it out. You are going to be a great representative for them, and hopefully you can flip the Senate. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, guys.